Okay. Did you click?
I did click. It's just taking a little bit of time. It did that last time.
Okay. Good thing we started a minute early. Okay, let's see. Okay, 30 Network is live now. Let's drop the link.
Is it up here?
It's on the 30 Network page.
I don't see it.
Let's go to 30 Network.
Sorry guys, we're just dropping links for
Hey,
about
you're right on
30
time,
seconds.
people. This is awesome. We're dropping the links on our timelines on the event page. And I'm going to drop it on my timeline, DJ Chuang here, for 30 Network. And it's already on the 30 Network page. So that's all places I'm going to drop it in. Wilson, where are you going to drop it?
My thing's lagging. Is it right here?
That's where you can grab the link. Yep.
Okay.
30 Network. 30.network. So scroll down a little bit and grab the link. Grab that link.
How?
Right click on the 1 minute.
Okay. Yay.
That's not going to do it. Right click. Can you right click?
I can't right click.
Oh, that's why. Well,
Apple does not allow you to right click.
you have to two-finger click.
All right. You can figure this out, right?
Well, we're gonna do this right,
Ah, there you go.
and then we're gonna drop it on Renew Church because Pastor Wilson is. Okay, you have to navigate your keyboard here. Hang in there. We're just gonna do a 30-minute chat here with Pastor Wilson Wang, and we're gonna talk about humility. And this is a exercise in humility as we get this Facebook live stream going.
Self-promotion.
And we are live streaming from a MacBook Pro. MacBook Air? MacBook
Pro.
Yeah, and there's this free software that can do this, which is really awesome. First time I've learned about it. And perhaps I'll create another webinar on another day to show you how to do this, because it's a way better video experience than a smartphone, kind of wobbly and so on. But we're on time. We're ready to go live. You ready, Wilson?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. My name is DJ Chuang, representing the 30 Network, and we are about advancing the leadership of Asian American pastors for a multi-ethnic world. And this is our second webinar, and I'm privileged to be sitting here with Pastor Wilson Wang, who planted a church here in Fullerton called Renew Church. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'll be talking about in the next 30 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, DJ. So I get to pastor Renew Church. It's a multi-ethnic church. We just started up 2 years ago, so it's been really fun to see God build this community and take it outside of me and my passion and gifts. And I also help out at Epic. I'm a MTL there, babysitting 6 campuses this year, but really planted 2 and oversee 2 of them, Mount Sac and Cal State Fullerton. And lastly, my wife's pregnant, so we're due in 2 months.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Praise the Lord.
Thank you. I'm scared.
Well, you gave birth to a church and now to a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us about humility. What are you learning as a young pastor about humility from the example of Jesus?
Yeah. All right. So he's out. But thanks so much for hanging out with me. I think, first of all, it's really, if you have any questions, you could go ahead and post it on the 30 Network page, and DJ will field that. But I think humility is a topic that I hesitate to cover. I think a lot of people do, just because the implication of talking about humility is that you are humble, and then the implication of being humble is that you're prideful, right? So it's kind of a catch-22. But I've actually put a lot of thought into humility because it's something I aspire to have and to embody as a leader, and yet not sure for a long time how to do that. You know, my dad talked to me about being humble. He changed his middle name to Humble in Chinese. And yet when I talk about humility with my lead pastor back in the days, he gave this story about a Chinese general pre-World War I who would have his bodyguard drop him off at the toilet or the outhouse of his soldiers. And his bodyguard's always asking him, like, why are you using the restroom here? You have a nice private restroom, in your cabin. But he would just ask him to drop him off. And one day he took especially long. So the bodyguard got worried, burst into the big, restroom and found the general scrubbing toilets and scrubbing the bathroom. And that was how my lead pastor portrayed humility, which I think there are humble characteristics to that story. And yet there's limitations because humility and power or platform isn't really related there, right? So you're humble off stage, you're humble outside of power, you're humble outside of influence. And so for a long time, I've been really trying to understand what humility looks like as a leader when you're making decisions, when you're on stage, when you have the spotlight on you and people are under your influence. And so my thesis, I'd say, is that humility is power that we properly manage or steward. And so let me give you an idea of power because it feels so contrary to humility. But I think power is really the influence and the stewardship that God entrusts to us, whether it's over our lives, the life of our family, or our community. And I've been thinking about the severity or the way that God delegates when he gives power, that it's not something he does lightly, and often he doesn't take it back, even when we mess up. And so Adam and Eve was given power over the earth, right, to steward and manage it. And when they ate the apple, the whole earth got cursed. And I think that's kind of a big deal. Like if I was God, I'd be like, oh, you mismanaged this. Let me take it back from you. But he doesn't do that. Like their power had real severe ramifications over the things that they were to steward. If you think about Israel and the kings, in the same way, when a king was following the Lord, Israel prospered. When a king wasn't, they would worship idols. And then I think about the power I have in my life. And when I think about the power to destroy, it kind of gives me this weight of stewardship that I think is different. So if I wanted to, I could kill myself. So I have the power to end my life. I have the power pretty much to end my marriage if I wanted to cheat on my wife who's pregnant, which is probably the worst thing conceivable. I have the power to really disrupt the church, right? I could take our reserves and go to Vegas and blow it. There's a lot of ways that power can be abused. And so I think leaders need to deeply think about how God's given them power and how we need to recognize this power, because unless we recognize power, we can't manage power. Unless we recognize and really feel the weight of the power and influence and the things God's delegated into our hands, we're not going to steward it well. So, for example, if you won $100 million from the lottery, I think one conventional view of humility, especially in Asian American leadership, is just to kind of deny that you have money, right? Deny your gifts, deny your power, deny your titles. And if I were to deny the $100 million I won and bury it under the ground or pretend I don't have it, I'm not able to properly manage that money, or you wouldn't be able to properly manage that money. So I feel like maybe on the front end of humility is taking seriously stewardship. Knowing that's from the Lord and knowing that he's placed certain things in our hands. He's placed our life, right? To steward our life, our days, our talents, to steward our families, to steward our relationship, our platforms for God. And so I think once we've really thought through stewardship and what it looks like to manage power well, I think that's how humility and power coincide and coexist. And so let me give you 5 markers of what I consider proper stewardship of power to look like, which in my definition equivocates to humility. And I try to draw from, of course, the example of Jesus. The first thing I think about in terms of humility is and stewardship is the ability to release power. And so one of the ways that I see Jesus release power the most is him dying on the cross, having the solution of the gospel in his hands, ready to give it to the world, right? But he doesn't go on a megaphone and announce it. He doesn't put this, knowing God personally booklet on the clouds. He commissions his disciples, and then he ascends to heaven. And I think about releasing power as one of the greatest markers of humility. And part of releasing power, I think, is disappearing, is kind of removing yourself. And that's what Jesus does in the most explicit way. Of course, he gives us the Spirit. But if Jesus was like, okay, let's share the gospel, and I'm going to go with you physically to the ends of the earth and set up churches with you and all of that, I don't think any of us would have vibrant ministries, because all of us would be going to the biggest mega church on earth, right, which is Jesus' church. But for him to step back and say, I'm commissioning my disciples to go, I thought was a really powerful statement of humility. And so some of the ways that I've been able to do that is at Epic, I have these two staff members, Patrick and Mitchell Liu. And about 2 years ago, I really started seeing them emerge as leaders. But we would have these leadership meetings with all the students, and I'm trying to delegate to them these large functions of leadership, like managing small group or vision casting. And they did a great job, right? They prepared well, and they would give vision and direction. But I noticed that when I was in the room, everyone was still looking to me. Mm-hmm. When I was in the room, there was just an immediate power shift where if I'm nodding, everyone does it. If I don't nod, they don't do it. Everyone wants me to chime in. I felt the same way with our young adult leadership. We were launching a church, and I would go to all the young adult small groups, and I set up leaders. But at the end of the day, everyone is still wanting me to weigh in or wanting me to make a decision. And even the leadership would look to me, right? And so one of the most, I thought, empowering things that I did in terms of stewarding power was to remove myself, was to place people in positions of authority and power, and then to kind of walk away and maybe coach from afar or allow them to mess up and not manage them. Does that make sense, DJ? Am I okay?
Sounds good so far. We've got over a dozen people transfixed on your every
word. Wow. All right. I'm sure that number will go down soon. The second point, I only have like 3 to 10, but the second point is partnership. I think one of the best ways we can steward power is to bring people into partnership. I think about when Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, but friends. And I just wonder, when we have authority and power over people, do we see them as servants who are supposed to give us, give into our vision and agenda and do what we tell them to do? Or do we see them as friends? Do we see them as equals, as part of the body of Christ, as important as we are, part of the team? I have a great staff member. Her name's Belinda, and she handles so much of the admin at church. And I asked her just one day, I said, do you feel like you're my employee, or do you feel like you're a part of the team, that we're teammates? And she said, we're teammates. And that made me really happy, because honestly, like, the church wouldn't be able to function without her. I really feel like she's as important as I am. One of the ways that we do this is financially. Every person on our team is paid pretty much the same, plus or minus a few dollars, like $1 or $2. From Belinda, who does admin, who's also an optometrist on the side, to Tiffany and Paul, who lead our women's ministry, dash our finances. My wife is the only one underpaid, but I hope to correct that in the near future. And I think that when we see people as friends, it actually gives us the ability to recruit leaders that are better than us. So I have a few guys at my church who have, like, one of the guys, his name's Ken Ye, and he was my former youth pastor. Like, he's about 15 years older than me. He discipled me. he watched me work through heresy, and now he sits at the pew of Renew. He also preaches, is on our preaching team. I have other guys who have led church networks on the board of church networks. I have other pastors, army chaplain who's a part of our leadership, and guys who have pastored at large churches. And I think the reason why they can be at Renew with a guy younger than them, a guy less experienced than them, a guy less educated than them, is because they don't feel like they're a servant. They don't feel like they're just another member at the church and I'm their pastor. They feel like a friend. They are my friends. And I think there's something about power dynamics that when Jesus invites us into friendship, he says that, hey, we're a part of the same team, that we want to live authentically with each other. Primarily, it's about relationship and not about structure. And when I look at the leaders around Renew, who are better than me in all these different categories, I think they're there not because I'm a phenomenal preacher, not because I have this compelling vision that is completely unique to us. I think they're there because they feel like they're on a team, that they're my friends, and I feel like that comes from a place of humility, because when I talk to them, I really do speak to them, whether it's in a sermon or personally, as friends, knowing that I'm not the smartest, the best Christian, the best thinker in the room. But I think the security comes because there's this deep sense in which I'm the pastor of Renew because God's asked me to steward it. It doesn't come from me being the best speaker or pastor or thinker. And so I can allow for better leaders than I, a part of Renew. I could allow for better preachers than I, a part of Renew, because it's about God asking me to steward it and not about me being the best. I hope that makes sense. Thirdly, and again, I don't have like 3 to 10 points, but I think about Jesus in terms of how he stewards power, in him serving others in his power. So every miracle that Jesus does is in service to someone else. And I wonder if when I do acts of power, when I make decisions, when I'm on stage, is it in service to another person? This one preacher said that his fruit grows on the tree of other men. And I think about young guys like me, in our 20s and 30s. We have a lot to prove, and some of that is good and some of that's bad. There's things that I still want to do in my ministry that I haven't done. But then I look at my mentor, Tom Virtue, and other mentors that I've had, and they've kind of finished that phase of their life, right? They've finished proving themselves. They finished their ministry that they've wanted to do. They've had their platform, and now they're all about investing in the next guys, helping to mentor someone like me. And I remember just sitting down with Tom and saying, how do I get to where you are like 20 years earlier, where it's not about me, where it's not about the things I want to accomplish and my agenda and proving myself, where I can truly be about other people aside from my vision and my agenda. And so, again, I think this is something I'm still really thinking about, but some things that have helped me is just kind of listening to other people's dreams and visions about the church, but sometimes, and maybe even more so, outside of the church. That's somewhat my mentor, Rick Micey, told me to do that. Just like, do you know the dreams, the personal callings of your leadership, of all the people who serve with you? And it's probably not going to be about your church, right? Do you know their dreams? And are you willing to invest in their dreams? And so I've been trying to stop and just listen to these guys and ask, what are your dreams? And what are the things that God's placed on your heart? So I think about Mitchell and Michelle. They've served really faithfully in Epic with me. And they want to do film. And so I was like, man, how can I further their dream and their calling in God's kingdom? So I called up my friend who's in film, his name's Rob, and Rob gave him internships in this really up and coming film company that does like viral marketing. They've kind of spearheaded that. Another girl, she wants to be a physical therapist. And so I hooked her up with a physical therapist I knew to do some internship hours. Another guy, he wants to do photography. So I connected him to someone who has a studio. And so I think part of using power and stewarding it well is saying, when I look at the people around me, am I setting them up for ministry and for God's kingdom work beyond my agenda, beyond my vision? Am I really about them and the calling that God has for them, or about what I'm up to and my vision? And I would just want to say, like, the last part of this is, I feel like when we're able to live and lead with humility, there's a lot of freedom that comes with it, because we get to be us. Like, I get to be me. I get to be flawed. I get to be not the smartest guy in the room. I get to be really honest. And I think that there's this sense that this power, this authority God's given me, didn't come from my gifts. It didn't come from my abilities. And so there's kind of a confidence that comes from that, where it's not performance-based, where it's not centered around whether I am competent or not, although being competent is good. But it's centered around God just kind of saying, hey, Wilson, I want you to steward these things for a specific season, and these are your talents. Don't bury them, admit that you have these talents and use them and steward them well. I think when a leader stewards his gifts well, the people under them feel free. They feel like there's a lot of space to move and to grow and to thrive, that they have a voice, that their voice is lifted up, right? Using our power to lift the voice of others. And so there's this freedom that comes from humility that I think I get to experience, and also those around me get to experience as well.
Well, thank you, Wilson. I really appreciate how you've connected three things that often aren't spoken about together, that of humility, leadership, and power. And I found it really helpful that you described a very tangible way of how do you express humility.
Mm-hmm.
Often we hear about it being an attitude, but that's very internal. It's like, well, how does that get expressed? And you described beautifully about some different ways of how to steward power and share power and show others are just as valuable and have a valuable contribution to the kingdom of God as you do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you describe a time when you struggled with humility, whether it's thinking of yourself too highly or too lowly?
Yeah. Church planning is tough. Like, you really get all the insecurities that I feel as just a person come up with church planning, because on the front end of it is just hardcore rejection all the time. What was the question? Struggling
just
with pride.
Describing a time when you've struggled with humility, and how do you communicate humbly when you have to make some adjustments about how you think of yourself.
So I think in that insecurity, pride is the best shield, not the best, but the most kind of my go-to shield for insecurity, where I can then say, hey, it's about me. It's about what I can do. I have something to prove. These people don't believe in me. I'm gonna show them that they're wrong. Other times of pride, I just feel like I think there's never a moment where I'm not prideful. And every time we try to be humble, there's pride that leaks into it. And even just the awareness of us doing a humble act can feel subversively prideful. So to me, that question feels like I struggle with it every moment of the day, I think I see pride in my anger. I see pride when someone says no to me and I can't receive that. I want to react with a power play versus really asking, like, maybe this no is from the Lord, and maybe it's the best for him and the best for our ministry. and I think pride for me shows when I just want people to say yes to me every time.
Mm.
So there's all kinds of situations,
Mm-hmm.
but those are probably a few I can think of.
Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. You also shared a little bit about how you I lost my train of thought, but you also shared a bit about how you share power and no, I lost the train of thought. So that's all.
That's how we're ending this.
We're coming up on the end of our time. We don't have a lot of questions coming in, but I think people were really transfixed and appreciate what you had to say about humility and leadership and how you share power. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, appreciate you, DJ.
I was going to say, well, this is actually a moment of humility for me. Is like I was prepared to say something and I lost it. I didn't write it down. And how do you deal with a situation where you've made a mistake?
Okay, let's go with this.
And you might lose people's respect.
Oh,
How do you navigate that? Situation as we're just experiencing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like when you are prideful, you have a lot further to fall, right? So if you're living a lifestyle of humility in your leadership, like people at Renewed and the people who've worked with me, they know I'm like I have a lot of like leadership quirks, personality quirks that they just kind of see coming at this point, you know? And so if I make a mistake, I think there is definitely a lot of ownership I need to take, depending on what kind of mistake it is, but to apologize to differing degrees. But at the same time, I think, you know, if your followers or congregants or community sees you as this like, and I've been to churches where this is true, you are the next Apostle Paul, right? Like your teaching's infallible, your leadership is like just phenomenal, and you hear the word of God, and then you know have it become tangible for your community, and you make a big mistake. I mean, either you're just gonna cover that up as some fluke, or God's messed up, or the people's messed up. But it's like Trump, right? He can't admit to anything he does wrong because of how he's platformed himself. So I think for me, I apologized to someone a couple of days ago because I wrote her an email that was more brash, and so I went to visit and just say, "Hey, I'm really sorry," because I knew it hurt, you know. And I hope that could be part of how I lead, is by leading in being able to apologize for the big things and the small things in front of the large church, in front of people one-on-one. But I also don't think I fall from very high.
Well, thank you for being honest with how you've restored the relationship as well as restored the respect. It is a humble act to say, I'm sorry. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do to restore the relationship and to restore your leadership and continue serving people well. So thank you, Wilson, for being part of our first Facebook Live event on Facebook with 30 Network. And 30 Network is gathering again with an open access pre-conference on October 4th in front of the Exponential West Church Planting Conference. It's a phenomenal time of training for your church and your leadership team. And we have a super discounted rate and some special guests like Daniel M. and Dave Ferguson. Some of those names may not mean something to you right away, but if you go to our website, 30.network, that's 30.network, there's no com or net on the end, just 30.network. Take a look at the event. We would love to see you there. Space is limited, and we are creating that space where young leaders like Wilson can learn from one another in a humble posture to serve the kingdom of God. So thank you for tuning in, and hope to see you in October. Thank you, Wilson. You can click off and we're
Okay,
done.
my bad.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks for hanging out.